Let's take a quick look at revenues for the upcoming 26-27 school year. This is from the advertised budget from the Jersey City Public Schools. Like many districts throughout New Jersey, the school district funds itself through a mixture of primarily local and state revenue sources. Let's take a look at the local revenue sources first. The primary local revenue sources is the local school tax and then something called the payroll tax. The payroll tax is fairly unique to Jersey City. It was created in the 2019 timeframe with permission from the state, and it helps offset the property tax burden to fund the schools. And it was created in the wake of something called the S2 law, which I can certainly share more about, but I'm not going to get into detail here. The payroll tax is a tax on the employer. It's not on the employees. And also it is a tax on companies that have to have a minimum number of employees. So the local school tax, I'll mention a couple things here. It is $625 million. That's what's being presented for the April 30th final budget vote. It represents a 17% dollar for dollar increase over last year's levy amount of $534 million. Now, importantly, this does not mean a 17% increase in your tax bill if you're a taxpayer looking at this. Now, here's why we can't say it's 17% on your tax bill. Your tax bill is actually derived from four factors. It's the local school levy, which is what we're seeing here, but it's also the city levy and this county levy, and it's also the tax base. So we need these three other factors, the city levy, the county levy, and the assessed value of the tax base, to understand what the new general tax rate will be that will then be the determinant of your property tax. And all of this becomes more apparent in the summer time frame after the county and city strike their budgets. And that's why we see updated tax bills typically in Q3 of the calendar year. Okay, so that's a little bit about the school levy and connection to property tax. Let's now look at the state revenue sources. If you notice, we see in 26-27, there are three buckets of what are called categorical aid. There's special education aid, security aid, and transportation aid. These are three different buckets of aid that the state basically distributes to school districts throughout the state of New Jersey, and this is based on the School Funding Reform Act of 2008. Now, the other thing that I'll note, and I mentioned this in the expense video, is that we also have preschool education aid. So this is the revenue side of the preschool. As mentioned in the expense video, the state will distribute preschool education aid, and then it gets immediately directed to the pre-K classrooms. So it's an in and out item. Okay. I want to mention something about the equalization aid. In Jersey City, we've had something called the S2 law that's been playing out since 2018, and we see the tail end of it here in 24-25 with this $98 million of equalization aid, and then the next year in 25-26 we have nothing. So this is the last bit of aid that left Jersey City's books, so to speak, at the end of a 7-year time period that began in 2018. Now let's take a look at operating funds. We can think about this as cash on hand that the district has that it can use to fund this year's budget. Now there's a lot of nuance around this, so I don't want to get too far out over my skis, in terms of explaining this, other than to say that the auditor at the March 2026 meeting had some very helpful comments on the record. And I would have shared it in this video, except the school district took its Facebook Live video down that had those auditors' comments available to us. So that's an example of where the district is sort of curtailing transparency and our access to data. And it's an unfortunate thing. And if the district puts its video back up, I will share the comments that I thought were helpful. What I'm seeing here, though, is that in 2025-26, $148 million of what we can think of as cash on hand was used to help fund that year's school budget. And this year we have a lower amount of $98 million. Now, the less of cash on hand that there is, the more that the levy goes up, or the district simply has to cut its expense in order to make sure that it has funding for all of its expense. And I'll be listening more actively to the auditor, and I'll certainly want to go back and see if hopefully the district posts that video again, so we can learn from it. I'll just point out, there's also federal funding that comes in. There's Title I, Title II, et cetera in here. And there's some other items in here as well. Hope this is helpful as an overview of the revenues.